Okay. Anyway, I'll say three things that you just kind of need to understand is one, if you hadn't figured out, my Norwegian is almost non-existent, except for what I just said and what I'm going to say at the end. Okay? Obviously, I only speak English, and sometimes I speak too quickly because I get very excited about this topic. And number three, I walk back and forth, and the reason I walk back and forth is that I would like to engage you. I mean, not marriage, but just, make sure that we're eye to eye. But I also will probably walk down here because I feel this should be an interactive workshop or presentation where I want to hear what you have to say. Because I've heard what I've said for about 3 weeks I've been listening to myself. And while I'm very interesting, I need new ideas. And thank God for the clicker, because that really helps. So what I really would like, more than anything else, is because you're going to hear a lot from me after we do this first exercise, or activity. Can I say activity? And we're going to do something, okay? And the reason we're going to do something is because it's 10 o'clock in the morning, it's Tuesday, and it's snowing outside, and you'll probably spend a lot of time just listening, well, at least the morning, to people. So what I'd like you to do is look at what's on the screen. You see it? I want you to think about what the possibilities can be, okay? In other words, it's not what you think it is, but make it into something else. Because if you were a 3 or 4-year-old or a 5 or 6-year-old, this would be something else. Your mind would go, I was going to say bananas, but you'd go wild thinking about what the possibilities, what you could do this for. Or better yet, if you don't have something that you really need, this object can become the thing that you want most. So I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to think about what it could be. And then don't be surprised. I promise I won't ask you. Don't be surprised, because I already asked her earlier and she wasn't too comfortable with it. Don't be surprised if I just ask you what else it could be. Now, you don't have to do this by yourself. What would be really more interesting if you talk to the person next to you or even across the aisle about what other things it could be. Now, remember, just think about 5 things, just five, right? Because you do know if you were a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, you'd probably come up with about 35 things, right? Because they're really imaginative and so forth. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to give you about a minute and 30 seconds. Okay? So talk to the people next to you, come up with about 5 things, and then I'll just ask. Okay? You can do this. Okay. So you've had a little time to think about this. Now I've been looking around to see, how engaged you are, which is really makes me very happy. So I'm just going to do this. This will be a random volunteering thing, right? Because that basically means that you're going to volunteer after I randomly select you, right? So I'll get in front of the camera. You two look very engaged. So give me something. One. Oh, by the way, after they tell me one thing and I go to somebody else, you cannot repeat what you heard. Okay? Has to be something new. So.
Well, I got some sketches for you.
Okay, but sketches don't help.
Approaching Christmas, so this is definitely something for Christmas. If you turn it upside down, you have what is it?
Christmas decoration?
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
Or you could slice it on the sides and pull it towards each other, and you will have a lamp.
A lamp?
Yes.
That's good. That's enough. That's enough. Got to give other people a chance.
No,
it's all right. No.
5.
I said 5, but I said give me 1. You don't want to take the joy out of everybody else. No, this was a random voluntary thing. I randomly select you and you voluntarily say, yes, I'll do this.
Oh, this can be...
Just one. You had 25, right?
Yeah, a boat.
A boat! That's pretty good. I like that. Because in classrooms when they're arranged like this, the teacher never gets to the back. So I figured I would, be contrary and ask you. You really like volunteering, I see. Not me, you. Okay.
It's a small house.
Small house. I love it. We just need 2 more. It'd be really fun if I actually took the mic and you passed it down to, there you go. Yeah, right. Stop, go ahead. Oh, it's right on the border there. You both could say something.
We were talking about Bang & Olufsen.
Loudspeaker.
A loudspeaker, that's true. It could be like a telephone and things like that.
Could also be a drum.
A drum, beautiful. Beautiful. Is anybody really yearning to just say something that nobody else has said? Is that a yes? Because I saw you nodding. No, that would be you, yes. Yeah, you were nodding.
No.
No, I just thought I'd ask. See, a lot of metacognitive messages going on here that I'm trying to pick up on. It's anybody else? This is kind of like at a wedding, or you say it now or forever hold your peace. All right. So these are some things that I came up with, which are very similar to what you all have done and said. So that was great. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that because, you're laughing. But see, it's important. It's important to enjoy this because learning should be very playful. I know people talk about learning as being always about play, but I think if we make it playful and enjoyable, it can be very exciting. So really today, more than anything else, we've thought of what the possibilities are. We need to ask ourselves a number of questions. One, why are we actually building all these schools, right? And essentially, will these schools really have the impact that we think they will? Okay? Because I have a belief that we need to first understand what an innovative learning environment is before we can actually have the kind of impact on teaching and learning. And the reason I say that is because, as Siv has said, she read my book. And I know it was very dense. In fact, after I wrote the book, a friend of mine who was an architect said to me, "Peter, you wrote a book." Now, he also published a book at the same time, so I said, "You wrote a book too." And he said, "No, but you really wrote a book. You had actual words in it." Are there architects in the audience? Okay, so please don't be offended when I say this, but we don't read a whole lot. We like looking at pictures, and basically he created a beautiful picture book, not for little kids, for big kids, and I'm talking about us, on different school architecture throughout the world. But my book has a lot of words in it. And the point of my book, more than anything else, was that if we are going to be designing schools, we first need to start thinking about the pedagogy, essentially how you learn, how somebody teaches, what are the different ways that people become engaged in activity. Because if we start thinking that the building is going to make all the difference, maybe and possibly, at least what the research has shown, is that we might be surprised. And we'll go through that in a minute. But I want to first clarify a couple of things. Could anybody in the audience tell me what a post-occupancy evaluation is? Great, you can tell people now.
This is unfair, Peter.
Well, you raised your hand.
We didn't plan for this.
No, we didn't, but it's always a lot of fun this way.
Post-occupancy evaluation is stakeholder-based evaluation. You're asking the stakeholders, the users, if the building actually works.
That's good. That's good. That's good. But can I just add to it? Is that all right if I add to it?
Okay, but
Okay.
only because it's you.
Only because it's me. You couldn't add to it? She couldn't add to it? Could anybody else add to it?
Yes, we
Okay.
could.
I just want to make, because this is a democracy in my world. I have a funny story to go with that, but we don't have time for that. But in addition to it, it's stakeholder involvement, and it's usually a very rigorous way of examining the building, probably 6 months to a year after the building might be completed. Because what we're looking for is understanding how you use the facility. Does the AV work? Does the mechanical systems work? Do the classrooms work, for example? And that's really wonderful to find out all these things. And we've gained a lot of knowledge around how the physical environment can impact learning. For example, if it's too cold, very difficult to learn. In fact, yesterday at a workshop in Karlstad, one of the teachers, actually not just one, many of the teachers had indicated very clearly that they felt the environment was too cold. Now, if the environment is too cold, I don't know what that means in temperature, but too cold means that your fingers are probably getting, what happens when it gets too cold?
They fall off.
Yeah, they fall off. And then you can't write or use the computer. So that's probably not a good place to learn, right? But also if it's too hot, you can't learn either because then you can't breathe. or you struggle to breathe. So we know many things about the physical environment and how it can work with us. But what we don't really get when we're looking at post-occupancy evaluations is one thing which I think is really important. We don't take a lot of that information, or in the past we haven't, and then taken the knowledge and then use that knowledge to inform how we can design buildings. Okay? And there are examples of people, and I've been at conferences where people say, don't look at the research from years ago, because it's very different now. Ironically, there's new research that has come out that we'll talk about in a minute that reinforces research from the 1970s, for example. So we can't just throw things out. We can actually gain a lot of knowledge from looking at the research that's there. But what evidence-based design is really about is taking that information, giving it essentially to work with an architect or educational folks, and then using that information to inform the design, and then getting additional feedback. And every time we approach a new design, we continually get that feedback so we can improve on it. Because the truth is, there is research out there, there's not a lot of it. Okay? But I don't want you to be in a position where I constantly am hearing now, there's not enough research. Well, I know there's not enough research, but that's also code for saying, I don't know what to do, or we're going to create the most innovative learning environment in the world, and as a result of that, it's going to change behavior. And it will. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it will change behavior for the better, or what we assume is better. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about this today. All right? So why? Why do we build new buildings? Okay, this is the interactive part again. I won't pick on you this time. Once again, this is random, voluntary. Oh, you're laughing, so good. What would be a reason why we build buildings? This is on?
More students.
More students. You need more students. You want more students.
Yeah, want and they're coming.
We don't have a choice, so we have to build them for new students. Anything else? Don't look away. You can just say it. I'll repeat it. It's going to be real quiet. Nobody has to hear, just between you and me. Give me one. That's right. The buildings could be leaking. The roof could be leaking, so the buildings are in disrepair. Okay? So there are a lot of other reasons aside from the fact that the buildings are falling apart. The technology, for example, may not be able to work in a building like this that was built in the 1880s. Now, this building may bring a lot of natural light in. However, it's not great physically. But socially is what we also need to look at. And I think sometimes when we look at these buildings, we have this feeling that it's not a great place. And maybe the reason it's not a great place, or why we're trying to create all these innovative learning environments, is because these are our memories. Right? You went to a school exactly like this, right? You did, where the chairs and tables were bolted to the floor, and the teacher stood on a stage at the front of the room, and they were bolted to the floor. But we know that the design of schools isn't, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, this is terrible, right? How could we design places like that? Especially, how could we design places in black and white? Does anybody have children or seen children? You have children, right? Do your children, this is what my children do for me. They go, Daddy, when you were young, was the world in black and white? And I, of course, say, yes, it was. So that's what they think. They don't know that the color television changed everything in about the 1970s. So anyway, so this image that we have here also, at the time, we need to understand that this was innovation. The idea that now we're having graded classrooms and so forth. But we have, as you said earlier, many, many people coming to these places. How are we going to fit them all in? And this was a solution. Okay? But then if we jump 40 years ahead, that solution, even though there's research by Bruner and Bronfenbrenner and so forth, talking about team teaching and wanting students to have more choice in how they learn, there's work from John Dewey talking about hands-on learning, we still end up with this kind of learning environment. In addition, the work of Dewey regarding hands-on learning is pretty much stuck in like science. where you will do your practical work, where you're working cooperatively. But overall, this is what it looked like, even in the 1960s. But once again, we feel we're evolving. And the reason why we're evolving is because no longer is the teacher bolted to a stage at the front of the room. As you can see, the teacher's moving around, and there's no stage. But let me also be very clear. I've been to a number of schools in Sydney, the United States, and just recently, 2 weeks ago, in Katrineholm, in Sweden. And some of the classrooms still have stages. So even though we've removed the stage, this place still remains. Because many people are not ready to think about how teaching and learning might occur differently. And I shouldn't say it's more about not being ready, that there's change and there's fear. And fear is good, and change is good. So how do we get people over the fear? And inform them again and again that we're not really changing what they're doing, we're actually opening up a whole new world for them. So let's jump another 40 years in the future, or still for us, the past. This is how we've continued to evolve. And I kid you not when I say this, is that I was in a school, I'm working in a school in Perth. It's a vertical school. And I'm sorry, I kind of laugh when I hear that, not because it's wrong to do a vertical school, is that they think that it's such a new idea. I grew up in New York City. I only went to vertical schools. You know, I never had a class on the 3rd floor. It was always much higher. You know, so when they make a big deal about vertical schools, I question, what is the big deal? I can tell you after working in this school, the way it was designed is no different than if you made it a horizontal school. In fact, it's probably worse because they didn't think through things and they got caught up in the fear of what it means to be in a place that takes over 3 floors of a building in the central business district, of which, once again, that's the issue. The issue isn't vertical. The issue is that it is in the center of the city. But to me, that's not a big deal either because you're more connected to public transportation, which makes it easier in a city that's all about moving around in cars for you to let your children go on the train or the bus to get there. But when I look at this, I also get very frustrated because in the 1990s, I taught at a very alternative school in New York City, a public school, and it didn't look anything like this. So when we used to go on these school tours and things like that, associated with different architectural organizations, and they would say to me, oh, we're going to these new innovative places. And then you'd go to them, and you'd see that they kind of looked like that. And you'd ask the teachers, tell me about this. I'm not asking you, I'm reenacting. And I'd say, tell me about why you love this place. Because big smile on the face, oh, it's great. Well, why is it great? Oh, I just love this new school. The lights work. The AV works. The windows, I can close the windows. But all they did was take what they had before and replace it somewhere else. But the question is that innovative or not? So in reaction to these kind of places that we see in the 1990s, in the 2000s, this idea that we're going to create 21st century learning ideals. You've heard it as an entrepreneurial learning probably. Even right now in Australia, they're talking about future-focused learning. Are these ideas, any of these ideas, new ideas? That's kind of a question for you all. This could be right or wrong. Are any of these ideas new? That we want our students to be critical thinkers? No, they're not. Sir Francis Bacon was talking about this in 1649. We want our students to communicate. We want them to collaborate. We want them to be creative. And also recognize very clearly, historically speaking, the idea that this stuff is new bothers me. Because also we heard back in the 1880s during the Industrial Revolution that schools were not preparing our students for the future. We hear the same thing now. We have the same ideas, just remanufactured. And now they've added this notion of citizenship. But that was the whole idea of schools to begin with, to educate you about the society in which you grew up in. They've also added this idea of connectivity. But if you and I talk right, and we collaborate, we're communicating. Even if you don't say a word, you laughed, and through eyes, we're communicating. So I'm not clear about what they're really trying to do. It's just adding more words to things. But the words they're not talking about is this notion of competency. We want our teachers to be very competent in the things that they teach. We also want them to be competent in how they organize the space that they're given. And in many cases, they're not even included in the dialogue. And if they are, they don't even know what they're looking at when they look at floor plans. So when you're asked to design a future-focused building or innovative learning environment, these are all the words they throw at you. Anybody watch Peanuts or Charlie Brown when you were little? Anybody? Is that a yes? Remember when the teacher talked to Charlie Brown? What the teacher sounded like? Wah, 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 right? That's what that looks like to me. Because it's like, what does that all mean? I'm not even sure I like the idea of design thinking because I was doing that with students a long time ago. It's a great new word to say we have to plan, we have to think, we have to actually work through things, develop hypotheses, and test it. Why can't we just call it for what it is? So, now I want to talk to you about innovative learning environments, right? Because that's what we're trying to create. If you go on the internet, you don't have to do this now, but if you decide to go on this now, type in innovative learning environments. This school may come up. There's no land. Great idea. We'll build classrooms and link all these classrooms together and we'll put it on water. Has anybody been on water? Yes. What happens to a boat in water? It rocks. It rocks. This is a big deal, right? Because that means essentially, if it's rocking back and forth, how do we organize the furniture in it? Bolt it to the floor. We're right back to the 1920s, aren't we? The difference is that I may be over here and the students may be down here. You know, and if you look at the section, not only we're bolting to the floor, but we're only looking in one direction. Kind of like what we're doing now. But with that being said, in all fairness, the academic research coming out of New Zealand is also talking about that 40% of the time with students, the teacher has with students, 40% of that time is spent doing didactic or explicit teaching. So there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's essential. But what are we doing the other 60% of the time? And in that other 60% of the time, what can you do in that space? But it is an innovative learning environment. So anybody know where I'm going with this? Anybody want to try? You know, I used to teach at the university. This is the same response I'd get all the time. So I'm going to help. So really, when we're talking innovative learning environment, we're only talking about the physical environment. But here's the problem. If you're a teacher, you're only a teacher if you have students, right? If you're a school and you're a school building, you only know it's a school building if you have teachers and students and principals in it. Yes? Yes, thank you. I really like you, man. You got to come with me everywhere. Seriously, this is awesome. You know, I gave a talk last week, and 2 weeks ago, and it was well, for me, it was me trying to get comfortable in the space, and this woman wouldn't stop laughing. No matter what I did, she wouldn't stop laughing, and it was great because it loosened everybody up in the audience, so I appreciate what you're doing. So just feel free to yell out anytime. So I want to come back to this innovative learning environment, right? I want you to look carefully at the floor plans. Look carefully where the people are, right? If we're talking about innovation, just as a physical entity, would you call this innovative? The great thing about this is a 50-50 chance you could be right or you could be wrong, or it doesn't matter because it's your opinion. A quarter down the center of a building. Have you seen that before? No? No. Has anybody seen a quarter down the center of a building with classrooms on either side called the double-loaded quarter? Yes. Innovation? Don't know. Well, they kinked the building a little bit. It's got an angle. Okay, how about this? Classrooms that are rectangular? Is that innovation? Don't have to answer this one. I happen to like rectangular classrooms. I really do, because this is the alternative. Has anybody ever taught in a classroom that has an angled wall? Do you know how difficult it is to arrange furniture in a room that has an angled wall? It is very frustrating. And this is what I do a lot of. I try to create places in classrooms. And teachers usually go, I don't know what to do. And they get angry and they get frustrated. And then they become problem to the principal. And the principal doesn't know what to do. But it gets better. Right? But you know what's even great about this? Is the classroom that, well, first, the one on the right, the focal point. This projector is on the wall that's angling this way. And then they're having the students sit this way. Now, if you designed a theater like that, you'd probably be fired. But my favorite one is the one in the middle that runs right in the middle of the corridor. And the thinking is, oh, there won't be any students there, because students always come on time, right? They always do. They're never late for class, right? Everybody wants to sit in the front row. Have you noticed that? Yeah, all the time. And then there are the students like me who didn't do that, who may not like the teacher teaching at 1 o'clock. And even though the policy is we keep that sliding glass door closed, there's always somebody going, every day, same time, can be kind of irritating for a teacher. And why would I do it? Because I can. And that's exactly what, it's not me who's doing it, because I'm not there every day. But, that's the same kind of thinking. What the pictures, this floor plan doesn't show clearly enough is that there are glass doors in there, which are wonderful to see everything that's going on. So some really nice features. Except the glass doors are exposed on the classroom side, which means I lose about half the wall when the door's open. Or even when it's closed, because I'm afraid of putting furniture up against a wall, because there's some student or teacher, because let's not forget, we can be pretty heavy-handed, that'll just slide the door into the furniture, right? So we've lost space in there. In area, floor plan-wise, we've calculated, we meet the area, but in reality, we haven't got the space we need. We're actually confining ourselves. But if you thought those classrooms were wonderful, I didn't know how to even represent these classrooms. Now, if this works, and it does, you see that? Okay, I worked as an architect for many years. I remember in architecture school, if you're going to have a round stair, you want to show that on the outside of the building, right? Because I studied a lot of Richard Meyer's work. And when he had something round, it was prominent on the outside. Why is it on the inside? What is it really doing? It's a beautiful sculptural element. It's wonderful. But the question is, when we look at that, it's maybe good for the stairs, maybe not. But what's happened in the classroom? It's an L-shaped classroom which essentially has limited wall space. And just so that you know, walls and corners mean a lot to me. I'm very much connected to these things. So it comes back to that building could be seen as innovative. It could be seen as a building that is dynamic. Why? We've got angled walls. We've got walls that curve inside the building. But the problem with that for me is that I'm not interested in a dynamic building. I want to create places that are dynamic for students, which means we have to think about everything from the corners to the walls and how they're going to be used. Even thinking about just throwing people in the corner, that may be a good idea conceptually, but do they actually have the spaces in those areas in which they can settle in and work? So when we're thinking about the learning environment, whether it's innovative or not, we have to think about the relationship between the physical and the social, and how they shape one another and influence one another, because they're both active. And what that also means is that we're being constantly transformed by our environments. So it's constantly evolving. So the beauty about this whole conversation is that there's no perfect building, and that they're constantly evolving because there are new people who inhabit it all the time. But now I come to, how do we create critical thinking environments? How do we create creative environments formal and informal environments. How do we create environments that are democratic? Because in all those principles I showed you, all 6 of them, competency, collaboration, creativity, nobody, and I try really hard to do this when I write evaluations, is make it clear what the feeling of those spaces will be. But more importantly, giving people examples of what a collaborative space might look like, what a critical thinking space might look like. Does that look like a creative place or a critical thinking place? You don't have to answer that. I just want you to think about it. And then we come to this notion, once again, I need to revisit it because we have all these wonderful codes. And these codes are, I don't know, there's not enough. And then there was recently a conference that occurred a couple of weeks ago where people came out of it. And I talked to a couple of people and they said, it's great, they did all this research. Predominantly what they found out was that schools are very messy places. And why are schools very messy places? Because unlike hospitals, you design the same surgery theater every time because you're trained how to use that in a particular way. You don't do that with a classroom. Maybe we do it with an auditorium. Maybe. But the idea is that schools are very different. And even if there isn't enough research, as I said before, there's enough relevant information out there that we can use. So if anybody says, don't look at it, that should be a cue to say, I need to look at this. Because if you actually go through the research, what you find out, there are recommendations that you can use, that can inform you. So you can take the post-occupancy evaluations and use it to guide how you think about the design of spaces. So with that in mind, here's an example of a research study that was done at the University of Melbourne. It's comparing different classroom arrangements. Basically, separated classrooms like many schools we have, classrooms that are organized around a common space, classrooms that are connected by sliding doors or folding walls, classrooms that are connected by folding walls that also open up to the common space. And finally, the completely open plan. As you can see, I've circled number D. Number D. Letter D, because numbers are not letters, right? My kids are always calling me out on these things, because now they want to show how smart they are and smarter than me. They are. So D. You know why they like D? Because if it gets too noisy, I can close the doors. That's a good reason. That's a very good reason. Teachers can supervise the entire floor. So one teacher can stand in one place and see everything all the way at the back of the room. Can you see me? Oh, good. I just want to make sure, because you're all the way back there. And as we know from the research on acoustics and all that, and noise in rooms, it means that since I'm standing up there, I'm not really that close to you. So I just want to make sure that it's all good. It's all good? I just threw out some more research information that we can use. The one that really bothers me with this is the idea that you're more conducive to organize the furniture in a bigger space. I've been rearranging classrooms since I was a teacher, when I was this big. To tell me that you're more likely to arrange the room for small group work in a larger space, I don't understand, which is really getting to the notion of competency and understanding how to use space. So I want to tell you a story. So I was doing some work in Sydney. And the teacher said, the room is too small, it's too small. And it was a demountable classroom, one that was only supposed to be there for a year. You ever hear that one? It's going to be here for a year, then 50 years later it's still there. I don't know what to do in that space, they said to me. I said, okay, let me look at it. And I walked in, and they had 30 students in the class, and there's 60 square meters. That's a lot of space, right? Yeah. It's a lot of space. So I said, let me try something. So I rearranged the room. I rearranged where the desks were. I placed the teacher in the center of the room because I didn't want them bolted to the front. And they would go, wow, look at all the space we have. That was okay. But you know what's most ironic? I'm walking out the door with the architect who's designing the new building. And he goes to me, man, how could they not see that? And I shook my head. I waited 3 months later, saw how they laid out the furniture in their new design, and I said the same thing. How could he not see what we did before? Because he's not doing it. I don't want to say it's not about caring. I just want to say that it's easy to say, why didn't they see it? But we should be asking ourselves this question, why are we not seeing it? So I have more questions for this. While it looks good on paper, they did this research in 2016, the good news is we still have classrooms. So if I want to close the doors for noise, great, we know that. Okay? But it doesn't talk about, it says people are able to engage in these environments, but what kind of engagements are they talking about? Did you know there's cognitive engagement? Is that a yes or a no? Yes. Who said yes? Cognitive engagement, what would that be? Hold on, I got to get you the mic.
That's too difficult.
What?
It's too difficult.
Oh, so you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So high levels of cognitive engagement, and you tell me if I'm correct, okay? Okay. So high levels of cognitive engagement means I really study hard and I want to learn. Social emotional engagement. You want me? I'll do it again. All right. So social emotional engagement is that you really want to be in this place, this school. So high levels of social emotional engagement means not only do you want to go to class, but you want to participate in the debate team, the chess team, the baseball team. Yes? Yes. You play a lot of baseball here?
Not much.
Not much. Because of the snow, right?
Yeah, we go skiing.
You go skiing. But you want to participate in skiing, right? Yes. There's also behavioral engagement. This one I know is really tough, so I'm going to do this one too, okay? All right. So behavioral engagement means that high levels of behavioral engagement is that you listen to the orders, the codes, the rules in the school, right? So once again, I don't know because they haven't defined those types of engagement. There's also Levin-Wenger's peripheral engagement related to situated learning, which means that there's peripherally, I see what's going on. I can move from peripheral, it's a mouthful, I'm really sorry. I wish they came up with different words. Peripheral engagements, I can look on and see what's going on, but then I can guide you, and from these guidances, or that's not a word, but by directing you, you can then become fully engaged in an activity. Okay? So what are they talking about? They don't talk about the type of furniture in the spaces. They don't talk about the spaces in and of themselves. They don't talk about what activities were occurring in the spaces, why people were engaged. And what they really never talked about when I asked was that they never understood that with the D plan, not only can I close the doors, but I also have places where students can settle into these environments because there are many more corners. And I can tell you from my journey through Sweden and all my work in Perth, in Australia, United States, this is probably the most important thing that I keep coming back to. And it comes from the fact when I taught, where did students like to go? Every time I talk to a teacher, where do students go? And it's like a light bulb goes off in their head. Corners. I talked to a teacher a few years ago, and he basically said, after I said, look, you have no corners. And he kept thinking about it. And it was like he was Rain Man. Corners. And he realized, oh my God, we're not making use of these places that kids can settle into. And this was a high school. I have that effect on people, I'm really sorry. But that to me is essential. And the reason I know this is because when you look at these open plan environments, you have to ask yourself, where are the spaces where somebody can settle into? And the reason I put both of these up is because in the 1970s, does anybody remember the 1970s? Good times. Staying Alive. I think ABBA was really big at that time too, right? Okay. The open plan was basically a large warehouse like this. How many corners are in this room? Not a lot. And in the big plan on the bottom, you've got 30 kids in a classroom, that's 210 people using that space. For a moment, what is the biggest issue with this space? It's open. You're talking loudly. You're talking loudly. You're talking noise. That would be the thing. But it's not just noise. It's we're competing with one another to make our points across, to get our points across with students. And look how big it is. Where am I going to settle into? Where am I going to go? In my recent journeys here, not here, but in Sweden, open plan has a new meaning. Open plan refers to classrooms with common areas that's in front of them, essentially. But if you look at this one, yep, there we go. The idea here was that there are 4 areas that you can go to. There's an area with a gradang, little amphitheater seating that you can gather a larger group with, but there are little areas outside the classroom spaces, so if I want to extend the classroom, I can. Because we don't need to have group rooms all the time. We need to just have areas where students can breathe. So here's another example of an open plan. Here's my corner. Can I use it? Why not? Yes, it's the egress door so that I can get out if there's a fire. Can I use the spaces outside? Yeah, but if I'm a teacher and I can't see what you're doing, am I going to let you go outside? Probably not. I throw in the purple ones to basically say you could add furniture, but then you have to think about how that's going to be organized, how to move through the space, because that's important. My favorite is this. These corners here, that can't be that comfortable. That doesn't feel like a comfortable space. It's closing in on you. The idea of these spaces is to create places where people come together, not force people together. It's like riding on the metro in Sweden or New York City. People on top of you is not a good feeling. You're laughing. You don't like it either, or you? Okay. That's not bad, but look at how much space is kind of left over. So even though it may meet the area that's required, you can't use it for certain things. You're losing space. And the same thing with this room, because you still want to have, remember, 40% of the time we're doing didactic or explicit teaching. So what happens here? It's a nice corridor, though, to move between spaces, but I don't want to use it that way. So now I want to come back to the research on open plan learning environments. Carol Weinstein in 1979 pointed out from her research that with too many with class stations or people trying to talk over each other, number one, it was too noisy. Number two, people didn't know where to go. While we think that a student will pick and choose what they want to do, that's great for a student. But if you have 210 people, that's a whole different economy of people. The capacity is too large. So what did teachers started to do? In those type of environments, building lofts, building areas that can gather people. In research, action research that I did for open plan learning environments for early learning centers, the same thing. We can't put 30, 40, 50, 60 cubbies in one corner. Kids don't know where their stuff is. But let's break it down. If we've got 90 kids, we'll put 30 here, 30 here, 30 there. The only reason I chose 90 is because I could do 30 really quickly. It could have been 45. I just thought of that now. But the idea is not just for the students to know where they go, it's also good for the parents. The other thing about that research is that they said, Carol Weinstein's research pointed out, there's a disconnect for how I want to teach and how people learn. There are no spaces that I can retreat to or go to. So in this research study here that I haven't highlighted who the authors are, and I apologize. One is PIPPA, P-I-P-P-I-A. I can't pronounce the other one. It's not in my head right now. But anyway, they just recently came out with this research looking at an open plan in a warehouse of 120 students in a place. One alpha teacher. So we've gotten better. We're not talking over each other. We're going to do the same work all together, where you've got 3 other teachers supporting this one alpha teacher, right? But you know what happened in this open plan space? Is anybody curious? The answer is yes. Oh, good. Is that the kids weren't focused on getting their work done. They broke up into small groups, but it became a social exchange of ideas. It wasn't focused on the work. Why? Because we rely on, when we're asking students to work in small groups, they need to have materials and resources available to them. They didn't have enough whiteboards because they didn't have enough walls. They didn't have enough tables. They didn't have enough whiteboard markers. There weren't enough plugs for their computers or iPads or whatever they're using. So yes, it's wonderful, and you have these wonderful ideas about open is great, but maybe we need to rethink what open means. Maybe it's closer to something like this or the previous one we saw. But if we're going to do that, then we have to think and be accountable for every wall and every corner. Because a wall isn't just a wall. A wall is a place for learning. We did a workshop yesterday, and the same workshop, well, actually there was one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And one of the issues was, we don't have any ping pong tables. You know ping pong, right? So I said, well, what about putting tape on the floor and making the tape like a tennis court? Now I don't have to buy a ping pong table. I just need to get tennis balls. You do the same thing, and actually more kids could participate in this activity. I'm not saying that's a great solution, but instead of saying no, coming back to what are the possibilities? And most importantly, the kind of environments that have a variety of different spaces is supported in the research in neuroscience. If everything is the same, doesn't it get kind of sterile? And in my field of environmental psychology, it's also reinforced by the work of Gary Moore, that if we're able to settle in to areas, corners and things, then maybe we will focus better on the tasks at hand. And in my own action research work with high school students, with high school students in Australia, in Sweden, they came up with very similar things. We want to have a place where we can gather together, but we also want to have places that we can settle into. Is that me? Maybe it was. I'm so sorry. This could be very funny. I hope it's not bad. We'll find out. We'll just keep going, and we can always take all the microphones off later. And that's the other thing. We haven't even touched upon technology. We're going to leave that for another discussion. So the same thing when we organize elementary school. Same thing. We need places to gather, and we need places to kind of retreat to. So if I were to give you some kind of guidelines to think about, I'm going to stay away from that speaker. That's all right with everybody? Boom. An electrical pulse will go through all of us, and none of our iPhones will work, our computers will work. That could be great, right? Some guidelines, right? We want our students to be able to manage their interactions. Now, let's be very clear about this. It's not all of a sudden, oh, you can just manage your own stuff. You can figure out what you're going to do. Great. That was the same thinking of the open plan in the 1970s. We have to put into place structures so we begin to understand how we manage our interactions. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. With the 3rd and 4th grade class that I taught in, where I did my research and my academic research and many, many years ago, you have to continually structuring how you organize the kids to work with one another. So by the end of the year, they're very clear about who they can work with. Number 2, prospect and refuge. We want our students to be able to participate in classes, in activities, but there are times when they need to retreat and get away from all the stimulation. Typically what I've seen in elementary schools is a tent in the classroom where a child can go into. I typically recommend for high schools maybe some high back seating, even in a classroom. The spaces in between. I have a real issue with this room. I can't get to everybody. It may not be an issue for you, but it's an issue for me. Because when I teach, I want to be able to get to know everybody, like we talked back there, right? Right. But I haven't even talked to you all over here. So I don't even know you. I know them somewhat, but I don't even know you. So that personalization is kind of lost. But if I'm able to move through the space, I can have better contact with you. And believe it or not, this is what I think most teachers want. You don't go into teaching just to grade. You go into teaching to make a difference. Anybody seen this word before? You laugh. One laugh. Anybody seen this word before? You have too. What does it mean for you? Okay, I'll help.
Open area.
Open area, right? So you can move the furniture around. You a teacher? Okay. Teachers don't want to move the furniture around all the time. We've got to get over this myth. Oh, you can just move it spontaneously, not a problem. It's a lot of work that goes into it. Trust me, I do this all the time. You know, I travel from town to town to town. Most people do that for other reasons. I'm doing it to move furniture. Okay? But flexibility is also being able to physically move through the spaces so we can engage in different ways. And there's also a shift in mind, right? We're teaching and all that, or if I'm teaching, you raise a question, but it's not exactly what I want to talk about. But if I tell you no, it's going to shut you down. So I've got to figure out in my mind how I keep you participating and then bring us back to what I want to talk about. But I don't like talking about flexibility. I like to talk about placemaking. Sorry about that. With a lot of P's, you know. And with placemaking, what's implied is flexibility, because what you want to do, which is why I like corners, is you can create places in which people can settle into. If I ask you to create a place for music, you know what you're going to put in that space. If I ask you to create an area for art, you know what's going to be in that place. If we have a cooperative group area right here and we're going to do math, it's a place for math. That's how we need to be thinking about places. Let's get away from a lot of this rhetoric and all this nomenclature that keeps changing how we think about things, and let's keep it simple. Really, all we very simply want to do is connect people to one another, connect spaces, which connects people, connect ourselves through technology. It's all about connecting people and helping to develop relationships. So very quickly, and this is going to be fast because I probably only have about 5 minutes, right? I got 7? I can take my time now. Here's a classroom in Perth, right? Looks very similar to the 1920s. The teacher actually liked this space. But I can tell you, this is a really horrible place to be in. Yes, it's a corner, but you're trapped. Do you feel trapped in the middle right there? You can't get out. You can't get out, right? It could be any one of you in the middle. Just somebody nod, go, yes. You can't get out. You can't get out in the middle there. No, you're trapped. If we want to create places where kids don't feel trapped, where they don't feel on top of each other, where maybe we can decrease some bullying, maybe we can rethink how we organize these spaces. So what we did, after I talked to the teacher for about a half hour, calmed her down and said, you're still going to be able to do what you want to do, but now you can get to every student. Because if you're able to get to every student, guess what? Stress levels go down because I can identify much more quickly if you're about to get into a conflict. And instead of jumping over these people over here, making their life a mess, if you just visualize that for a moment, they're now already upset with me, so that's stress. So everybody's stress level goes up. You know, this way, I can get to everybody, I can see what's going on, and I can talk to you. And I can calm you down before it goes out of hand. And that's a very strange building in which I worked, because it was originally an open plan in the sense from the 1970s where there were no walls. And then they put walls up, because that's what happens. Because what? It was too noisy. And then they created these little puzzle pieces that now the teachers have to work in. So this was one of these very strange puzzles. Plus what the teacher did in this room is they not only had a desk that you saw in the corner over there, right? Right here, right? They're all protected and everything in a corner. They've taken a corner. Nobody else has one. Got a big desk here. For what? I don't know. But we're getting it out. This is my favorite classroom, right? Because I thought the teacher I was working with here would tell me, was just doing, wanted to meet with me just because the principal said I should. She should meet with me, right? That whole politics, right? So she's talking to me, she's laughing, young woman, and I said, I wasn't sure. I go, what would you like to do? You know what her first thing she wanted to do was? Anybody, take a guess. She wanted to take 10 desks out of the room. 30 kids, 10 desks out. Can you believe that? I almost had a heart attack. Never heard that before. No, I'm serious. I've never heard that before. As a result, we're able to create a more open space for the kids. We moved the cabinetry to the center for 8 places. Now we still need 2 places maybe for writing on, but she said this isn't a problem. They can sit at the edge of a table and work with the other kids. But the kids responded with, I feel so much better in here. I've got room. I can breathe. Same school. Same school. You can see that aisle kind of configuration. Now they can talk to one another this way, but there's really no space to move around. In many ways, it's not too different from the 1920s, the 1960s, or 2000, or kind of like how you are now. You're kind of completely exposed on all sides. So she took 6 desks out of the room. And believe it or not, it's more open. And you can see from the picture that it is open. But because we took this hexagonal table off of these walls that were being used for storage, that she didn't need the storage, she had those 6 places in there already. Because the idea behind this is that we will sit on the floor, right, because this is 2nd grade, and we will meet and we will talk, and then we will go work in a cooperative group. So this acted not only as a place where 6 kids could sit, it also becomes a symbol of where we are to do things. And that idea of sitting down and moving through the classroom is very symbolic. So we know when we meet first in a place, building upon my action research, we need a place to gather. When we sit down and have those conversations, we focus on something about what's happening throughout the day. And then we move to our own areas where we work together, cooperatively. Pretty crowded, don't you think? They literally are sitting on top of one another. The teacher said to me, I really tried to do what you did in the other classrooms. I said, well, you've done really well. Except everybody's here and they have no place to be. Does anybody have tired children? Right? When they get tired, they get irritable. And my sons are always fighting with each other when they're tired. And when you're on top of each other, that creates more friction. So I said to her, let's take a couple of things out. But she said, no, I got 30 kids in here. I got to keep all 30 desks. I said, okay, we can do that. Remember, the other 2, we took out 6 and we took out 10, but we left 30 in here. You can see back here, they're sitting on a little bench. You can't see the bench, but trust me, they're sitting there. And all this stuff is in the center, and everything's angled. It's all over the place. We rearranged the room. I wish I had pictures of the children in there. But after we made this arrangement, she could move and get to everybody. She brought every teacher she could find that was still left at school at 3 o'clock to bring them to her room and said, I never would have thought of this. This is my favorite. This is the classroom that had the curved stair in it. You remember that building with the curved stair? Curved stair. It's a little a mess. It's innovative. It's future focused because it is soft furniture. It's got writable tables, right? This is what innovation is, soft seating and writable tables. Kids can't move, they can't breathe, teacher can't get to all the students. Took out some furniture, rearranged it, created a center space that the teacher can get to. I got 2 more pictures. And lo and behold, that back wall that's a curved wall now could be a writable wall. This is my favorite. Same school. This is innovation. Doesn't it look exactly like we're sitting now? Exactly. Except there's soft seating and maybe a high bench. That's innovation. What we did was this, creating groups of 4, allowing the teacher to move through this space. When the principal saw this and actually saw the teacher moving through this space, she said to me, I wasn't sure why I brought you here. I knew you had something to offer. I wasn't sure. Now I get it. Just want to show you my favorite classroom that I did 2 weeks ago. Projectors on one side, whiteboards on the other side. I asked the kids what they wanted to do in this space. They said they wanted to, this is me trying Swedish here, okay? Room i room. Got it, room in rooms, that's what they wanted. So we created a gradang with the sofa, which is always placed in the back. Why in the back do we always place sofas? I don't know, but they are. Put it in the center. Now I've got all these different spaces, 19 kids in the room. We're seating for more than 19. And they have little corner areas. Another room, we just rearranged it to open up the space. I asked the teacher how the students work. They said the students work talking to one another, side by side. So that's how I tried to arrange, because the room was really very difficult to even move through. So this way people can move through it. Just want to show you one of my favorite areas outside the classrooms that as a complementary space. That's how it was. We took the furniture apart and created these little zones in here where they can sit. And you can see this is live action. Last one, I wish I had taken pictures before, but this is a very open space, tables just kind of thrown in, high back seating thrown in, using the furniture, the storage areas to create corner areas for the table. There's a corner there that student's using, high back seating, putting a table there, so everybody has a place to kind of settle into. There's a space at the front. They just arranged it just like this. No central space where even people could choose to sit on the floor. They loved this. And now this space, which nobody wanted, not the seating, but that central space, now is the most popular space in this school. And now I'm going to stop, when you're probably very happy about this. So if you have any questions, I don't know if we have time, but I'll take them.